start streaming. Oh, I really, really do. Right, so to everybody who is with us on YouTube, hello, good evening and welcome. Hopefully you can hear me and you will be able to see my screen shortly. So we have a chat room full of people in Connect. We also have people live with us in Google+. So good evening to everybody. And I'm going to go and get my slides and I will be with you in a couple of seconds. And you should now be seeing my slides. So hopefully you all are. So hello, good evening and welcome officially. And welcome to Editing Video in Photoshop. If you don't know me, my name is Elaine Giles. I'm a trainer, been a trainer for many years, and I currently present the Mac Bytes podcast as well. And I am also the user group manager of the Northwest Adobe User Group in the UK. And we are an officially recognised Adobe user group. So if you want to know all about the stuff that I do on Adobe products, check out nwag.co.uk. But back to editing video, the topic of the night. And the first question has seriously got to be, why? Why would you want to do that? And that, when I've said to people, that's what I'm talking about tonight, that was predominantly the question they asked and absolutely the first question they asked. And I understand that because we have, especially if you're using a Mac, there are so many applications out there. But PC users have also got riches when it comes to editing video. So we've got iMovie, Final Cut Pro, Premiere Elements, Avid, Sony Vegas. There is all sorts out there. Why on earth would you want to do it in Photoshop when all of those applications are dedicated to video editing and Photoshop clearly isn't? Well, it's all to do with the workflow. It's about a combined workflow, taking the best that Photoshop has to offer and applying it to video. So if you think about your DSLR, if you have a DSLR, I bet you've got videos you've taken alongside your standard images. Well, just think of all the features that Photoshop has, and wouldn't it be awesome if you could apply them to video? So I'm thinking particularly blurring, colour correction, filters, and even leveraging the power of smart objects. And you can do all of that and much, much more when you edit your video in Photoshop. So back in 1984, and I was a mere child back then, of course, it was my grandmother that told me about this, she said, lying through her teeth. Video met artwork in an iconic pop video. So anybody who's with us live in the chat room, do you remember the group? If you do, put it in the chat room. And if you can remember the song, that's even better. But what this was, it was a groundbreaking video. It merged moving images with pencil drawings in such a seamless way. And what it did was bring a cartoon character to life. There were young ladies everywhere swooning as it did so. So have we got anybody who knows that? Has anybody typed that in?
Only me.
Oh, only one. Good grief. Maybe you all are a lot younger than I'm prepared to admit. It was Aha, and the video was called Take On Me. And this is just one of the things that you could do if you edited your video in Photoshop. So what back then took acres of computing power can now be done on a desktop with just Photoshop. So, without further ado, let's go in and have a look exactly what Photoshop can do. Enough theory. Now, I can't promise to have young ladies swooning, but I'll try. So, the first stop for us tonight is Adobe Bridge, and that's what I've got in front of me there. And the reason that I'm starting in Adobe Bridge, it's very handy to give you some idea of the file formats that Photoshop supports. So as soon as you start remembering, as soon as you start thinking about video and you start thinking about file formats, it'll be, well, will a video from my camera work in iMovie? Will it work in Photoshop? Oh, it's unlikely to work in Photoshop. So the best way, quickly, to know whether the footage that you have will work or not is to just open Bridge and point it at the folder containing your videos. And if Bridge can preview the file, then the chances are that Photoshop will be able to use that file. So what I've got here is the standard view in Bridge, which is called the Essentials view, and I have some JPEGs, I have a folder, and I've got a lot of MOV files. So I've got this nice cat here, and there's a couple of ways to preview in here. One is to press the spacebar, And what's happening over on the right hand side is that we're getting a preview of that cat, and it's a green screened cat. So we could put the green screen cat, once it's green screened out, over the top of any other video. But the point is it's previewing, which means that it is a file format that Photoshop supports. So that's the key thing that we're looking in Bridge for. You also have different views in here, so you could change that to film strip view, which if you're at the point that you're ingesting your video, you're going through your video to see whether it's a clip that you want to use, then Bridge can be used for that as well. So all to do with the views in Adobe Bridge. But it's not about Bridge, it's about Photoshop. So I have two videos in here in particular that are going to form the basis of one of the demonstrations tonight. And that is two videos from iStock. So this one here of a plane landing, and this one here of some coffee. And what I'm going to do with this is get it into Photoshop. So I'm going to run Photoshop, and there is Photoshop. I'm going to close that file down. Just save that and close it. And let's get that full screen. Oh, you're misbehaving. Come on, there we go. And just go back to Bridge. And I've got these two files selected. We go up to Tools and down to Photoshop. I can take the file straight from Bridge into Photoshop. And I'm going to go across there, and it's load files into Photoshop layers. And just click on there. Oh, and the first problem of the evening. No, I would not like to queue this. So what I'm going to do, I've had that a couple of times today, proves the point that although you can edit video in Photoshop, be careful when you're doing it. So all I did then was close it down and restart it. And then I'm going back to Bridge and I'm going to start again. So Photoshop and load files into Photoshop layers. And hopefully this time it's not doing something else and it'll load it in nicely for me. There we go. It's done it. So what I've got in here now, it's done a few things. It's created a new file in Photoshop and it's loaded in the two clips. So looking across at the layers over here, I have a new symbol on there. I have a little film icon next to it to indicate it is video. So that's one thing, but it's loaded them into two separate layers. And it's also gone to a different view. So my default view, the default view that I work with, just to show you, is EKG default. And that's how I normally work. And the reason that it's gone into that different view is some of the things that I have available here, like styles and swatches, are going to be less relevant to video work. But the timeline is going to be absolutely critical. So the view or workspace that you're looking for is the motion workspace. So I'm just going to click back onto motion. And that's what gives you predominantly the change, the file, the panel that you're going to need is this one at the bottom, this timeline panel. And that's where a lot of the magic is going to happen with video in Photoshop. So it's critical that you can actually see that. And then, as I say, it's loaded the two videos in and it's put them one on top of the other. So I will be working with the one with the plane first. Now what I could do with this is slide it across. And now instead of the videos being on top of one another, they are in separate tracks. But as I play through these, instead of missing the beginning of this one because they're in a layer stack, I've got that moved across. Now if I want those to be together, so I want a sequence with these two clips, then, and in this case I do, then what I can do is select both of them, and there we go, select both of them, go to there and create a new video group from clips. At the moment I don't have a video group. What's a video group? A video group is both a track and a sequence. So it puts your elements here, your separate video clips, into a sequence. And when I click this, I want you to look across on the right hand side in the layers palette, and you'll see something extra appear over there, which is a video group. So as I do that, I now have a video group in the layers stack. And if I open the disclosure triangle, there are the two video clips that I had. The other thing that has changed, so it's not just the layers palette on the right, but down here at the bottom, I now have video group 1. And if I open that, you can see these options down here, but I no longer have the two clips. That's because the clips are now pushed up next to each other. They're not in the right order anymore, but they're pushed up next to each other. So the first clip on the left-hand side is actually going to be the second in my sequence, and then I have this one of the plane. So just to show you now what we've actually got, and as I say, it's not in the right order, I'm just going to play this through. So to do that, I have this playhead, and I can either drag that across, you can actually see it, or I can elect to use some standard shortcut keys. Those standard shortcut keys, if you've edited video in anything else, they'll be instantly recognisable to you. For instance, the spacebar to play and to stop. But by default, that doesn't happen. You can press all of those keys and nothing happens. You need to be sure that in your timeline panel, you have gone into here and you have elected to enable timeline shortcut keys. So I'm going to do that and make sure that I have that tick next to there. Now I do. So if I use the spacebar, it will start playing this video. So it's a few seconds of video, all to do with coffee, and the second one is to do with an aircraft landing. Now what's happening as I'm playing that is, I'm just going to zoom in so you can see it. Along here, as it's playing, I'm getting a green line across the top. That's rendering as it goes. Now this video that I've got here has no audio on it yet. It will work with video with audio, so you don't have to remove it or mute it or anything. It will work absolutely fine with an audio track, but it will slow things down a lot. And these videos are stock videos, they don't have any audio, but I will be putting audio on it later. So those images that you've just seen there, those videos, that's everything that I'm going to be working with. So around this timeline palette, we have the transport controls on the left-hand side. We also have the scissors tool, or the blade tool, that splits at the playhead for you. And we have the transitions that you can then apply to your timeline. Then we have the timeline itself, which at the moment is set to frames across the top. And well, you've seen the playhead, so you can scrub backwards and forwards with the playhead there. Then the audio track, which is blank at the moment, is where the audio will be put on this. So what I'm going to do with that later is when I've finished it, I will add audio to that track. And then down at the bottom, you have your information. So you've got your position in the timeline at the moment, just to the left there. And on the right-hand side of that there, you've got your frame rate. And then you have this important controller, which is the zoom controller, and you're zooming in and out to the timeline. So if you have edited video in anything else, this should look instantly familiar. It is very similar. It's just that the majority of the screen is taken up with the image, or in this case the video, rather than focusing heavily on the timeline. The timeline sort of tagged on at the bottom. So first thing I need to do, zoom out so I can see the whole thing. And then I need the footage of the plane moving to the beginning of the timeline. So literally just pick it up, drag and drop it. Now remember, it's in the same video group, and this is going to form the basis of my whole video. So I'm going to double click in there and put base video, because I will be putting extra layers in there later, extra video groups, but at the moment I'm just working with this one. So the very first thing, the most basic thing to do here is to scrub through and look what I've got. Now the first video is fine, it's a little bit long if anything, but it's fine. The second one has different scenes, and I think from memory it has 5 different scenes. So the first one is where it's grinding the beans. The second one is, no, it's collecting the beans, isn't it? That's the grinding stage. And then on from there, there is the machine. On from there, there's pouring it into the cup. And then finally, it's going into this glass with ice there at the end, and that section's quite long as well. Now, I want those at the moment. If I play that through just once more and now talk you through it, as it goes from scene to scene, it's instant. There's no nice transition, gentle fade in and out. It's just cutting straight from one scene to another. And it's all in one clip. Now, I'd like some nice transitions there. So the first thing I'm going to have to be able to do is to section that off somehow. And that's not too tricky. As I move up here, the first cut that I need is to separate this scene from this scene. And because I enabled the shortcut keys on the timeline, I can use the arrow keys to move backwards and forwards 1 frame at a time. So making sure I'm on the first frame and I have the clip selected, if I go and click on the scissors tool, it just cuts that. So it splits that clip wherever the playhead is. So I now have this element here, and that is just the first scene. So now I'm going to move into here. That was the grinding of the beans. And now I need to position myself on the first frame of when the handle is pushed over to the left. So moving backwards, and that's my first frame. Making sure I've selected that, same process. And then literally all I need to do is to go through that, doing exactly that at the relevant places. So I think I had, did I have one more or two more? I had two more. So one from there. So get the first frame, moving across with the arrow key, select it and cut. And one more, which was the end of that, as that cup fills up. So there we go. And just move it back so it's the very first frame, and it's that one there. So now I've got all the pieces together. And the reason that I've done that is, for the changes I want to make to this, I need to have them separate. Once they're separate, I can do all sorts of things with them. I can put my transitions between them. I can even retime the clips if I want to. And that's what we're going to be having a look at now. So if I've got a clip, so first of all, if I've got a clip that's too long, so let's have a look at this one with the plane. The plane comes in virtually straight away, but once it gets to about there, we've got the gist of it. The plane's landed. But there is the rest of that there, if you wanted to play that through. I've got a couple of options with that. That is a little bit long. What I could do is speed it up. Another alternative would be to cut it. So I can position my playhead where I want to be the end of that. So let's say once that plane gets just under this lower fence element there, I want to finish that clip. I can either use the cut tool to cut it and then delete the piece, or I can move my playhead to the position there and I can click and drag that back, and I get that huge preview as I do so. As I drag it back to where my playhead is, everything moves back too. So it doesn't leave a gap, it just shrinks that clip down, so it's just the area that I want to use. So if you've recorded something and you have, I would say it needs topping and tailing. So it has some elements at the beginning and some at the end that are just where you've been keying up the camera and things like that. Then that's a great use for the trimming, where you just drag it back, drag it in from the left, in from the right, and leave yourself with just the footage that you want. Now these bits over here, as I say, have already been sliced and diced. Now I'm going to start putting some transitions on this now. And then I'll have a look at why I would need to retime things. But let's take it back and have a look at the very beginning. And at the beginning, it just starts to play. So there's no niceties of fading in and all of that. It just starts to play. Well, what I'm going to do is use this option here. And this gives you transitions. And you can fade, crossfade, fade from black, fade from white, or fade from any colour. Now, I'm just here going to do a fade with black. So drag that down to the beginning of the clip and release it. And that puts this on there. So just that tiny little symbol there, that is your transition. And if I right click on that, it brings up this dialog box, and it was the fade with black, and it had a duration of 1 second. And in here you can control that by the slider, so you can make it less, you can make it longer. You can also completely change your mind, so you can choose your fade with white, or your fade with colour. The reason that crossfade is dimmed out and unavailable is this is the first clip, so it can't crossfade from nothing into this one. It has to fade into this one from something else. So I'm going to leave it set to black. And let's take the playhead back and have a look what we've got now. Now it starts from black and it fades in over the course of 1 second into that video. Now I still think that that is a bit long. I'd like that plane to be coming in much faster. And what I can do in here is click on that tiny little icon, so it's a little play icon there. So just show you that zoomed in, little triangle, little play icon. When I click on that, it brings up this dialog box. And in here I can either speed it up in terms of percentage, or I can shorten the duration of it. So I'm going to speed that up. Let's speed that up a bit there. So let's take it up. Let's make it twice as fast, almost twice as fast. What happens is the actual clip on the timeline looks like it's shrunk, which it has, because now everything's there. All the same frames are there for this, but everything's happening much faster. So I'm playing it now and you can see, yep, that's much better. That plane's coming in now at an alarming speed. And that works much better for me. And then we go into the beans and all of that. Right. So my first clip is fine. I think the second clip's not too bad. And this one that we're looking at now isn't too bad. But this one here is very short. You can see it's the shortest clip that I've got on that timeline. And it's going to be very fast as I go through it. So at the moment you can see it. You know, when it starts playing, you can see it, you can see what's happening. But if you saw that jump from one to the other, I'd like these to fade nicely into each other. And for that, once I've got a crossfade between all of these clips, I'm not going to see much of that at all. It's going to fade in, quickly let me see it, and then fade out again. So what I'm going to do with that one is go in, and this time I'm going to take the speed the other way. So slow that down so it takes twice as long to do that. And that should take twice as long. Let's have a look. Yeah, that does seem to be a little bit slower, doesn't it? Unless it's applied it to this one. Has it done it to that one? Don't think so. Don't think it did. Think it put it on that one. Let's be sure. Yep, that's fine. So I've got that on there now. Now I want to put the crossfade. So let's have a look at that transition again from the plain to the coffee. And it was just a straight cut. Nothing clever at all. Just a cut between the two. All I've got, two clips bumped up next to each other. So I'm going to go back to the transitions, and this time I want to crossfade between the two clips. So I'm going to click and drag that down there. And this time, as I hover, it hovers over both of the clips. And when I release, it gives me a different symbol. So the first symbol was that triangle. This one is a completely different symbol, and that indicates that it's a crossfade. So let's have a look what happens now as I play from the plain to the beans. And it's a nice gentle fade between the two. And throughout the timeline, I'm going to do that with the rest of them. So it's just a matter of clicking on here and choosing the crossfade and dragging that over and just repeatedly doing that. And as it crossfades, it's using frames to overlap, and that's why the timeline is shrinking. It's because those frames are now overlapping each other. In fact, exactly where I'm positioned here, you can see I've got the hands and I've got the grinder there because they are now over the top of one another, and one is fading gently into the other. Okay, so let's play that through. And what should be happening here as I'm doing this is that it's rendering. So the green line is there for me as well as it's rendering in real time. As I say, I've tried this with audio, and my best advice would be to mute the audio until you've finished. It does seem to slow things down greatly if you have that in that way. There we go. So we have our video. Now, all of that, of course, could be done in any other application at all. So it doesn't matter really at this stage. We've not got onto the real specifics of what Photoshop can give you in terms of real benefit with your video. This is just showing you that it does have full basic editing features for video. If you don't have any other application but you do have Photoshop, then you are good to go. You wouldn't need to take out what you create in Photoshop into another video editing application. So I've got my footage, but now I need some extra stuff. The extra stuff I want is I'd like some text. I'd like to bring a logo in. I'd like to have some text explaining what's going on. So all of those elements, and all of those elements I had available in Bridge, but I also have them available off screen in a Finder window. So there's my Finder window. So I'm just going to keep that out of the way and start working with the extra elements that I need. So one of the elements that I need is I have a background pattern. So what I'm going to do with that is add in a new clip here. So down here before, we added in a new video group, and we added it with the clips that were already there. So, and we also created, so there's three ways to do this, and we also created one straight from Bridge. Now what I can do is create a new video group that's just blank, and it creates the video group on the layer for me, and it creates it down in the timeline for me. And what I'd like to do in that group is to add a new element to it. So I'm going to drag and drop in an element here. And there it is. It's actually put it at the top, but I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. And I'm going to scale that. So this is just a JPEG. It's absolutely just a JPEG. This is not video. It's just a still image that I've got up here. I'm going to put it in that video group. Now, putting it in that video group, put it on my timeline. If I take that out again, and just show you that. Once it's out of there, it's now not in my video group, it's in my brown coffee pattern. So I want it in with my video group here. And there it is. It's also created, it's still there, isn't it? It's put it down here. What is it doing to me? I tell you what, I'm going to undo that. There we go. Let's get it back where it was. I need to go back in my history here. So place the embedded smart object. Is that the one? Going to do that? You're not, are you? Oh dear. Let's go back to there. Let's leave it alone at that stage. Let's leave it alone. Right, so I've got my solid image in there, my still image. And what I want to do with that, I actually put a fade in at the beginning, but it would be much nicer if I faded in from this image. So rather than fading in from black, faded in from that image. So it's in this layer at the moment. Now I could leave it there, or I could actually put it in the base layer, because unless I want it fading over the top of what's there and something special happening, I could just crossfade between it. So that would work maybe. So I could do that. I'm going to leave it where it is, because it will give me the opportunity, hopefully, to grab all of this slot and move them to the side. So moving them along in their timeline. And you're not doing that either, are you? Let me make some room for it. Oh, it's not playing ball. I told you I've had a day with this. Don't do that to me. Okay, I will put that, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put that at the end here. That'll solve my problem. I will put it at the end and I will fade out to it. There we go. Because I was going to do that anyway. I was honest. Because I'm going to put some text on the end and the logo on the end as well. So what I need here is to fade out from one into the other. So there it is there. I need to fade nicely into that. So I'll worry about that shortly. But I need my other elements. So I've shown you you can add video. I've shown you can add a still image. I need another element now. So my other element is a logo. So I'm going in my file system to get my logo. And I have my logo in a lot of different formats, but I'm just going to add it as a PNG there. And that has added it over here. It's probably way too big, but I'm just going to accept that and put it in the top group and then hover over it so you can see it. And it's way too big, but I can use the standard Photoshop features. So I can use Command and T, which is the transform command. And in there, I can grab that and scale it down. So I want it much smaller and I want it over there and OK on there. And if I now pull that back, that should have that logo on top of my background. And the next element that I wanted to add to it was some text, and I'm going to use just standard Photoshop text. Now if I was compositing this in, for example, Final Cut Pro, I would probably create the text in Illustrator and I would bring it in as a vector. But seeing as though you're already in Photoshop, you can just use the standard Photoshop way to make text. So I've just used the T key and I've put that in there, and now I'm just going to type some text. So in here it was going to say from bean to cup, and it has said that, but it's white so you can't see it too well, but you will see it correctly when I put it in the right place. So I'm going to change the font so it's a nice style of font, and I have a font somewhere called Zapfino. There we go, and I'll make that a little bit bigger than that, and then I'll be able to move it into place. So somewhere about there. Now, let's have a look what we've got at the moment. We have got here the video group 1. This is going to be the logo. That's got the coffee cup in it. It's also got the text in it. Now, the problem I've got there is I explained about a video group containing all of these other elements. All of these are in that video group. But the thing is, when they're in a video group, that is a sequence. Now, these two elements I've got in a video group, but I don't want them sequenced. I want them to be on top of one another, so that won't work. I will need to generate another video group. So if I go back down here, I had an option to make a video group, a new one, or I can make it from a clip. So first thing, make sure I've got the text selected, because if I had something else selected, that would make me a video group, but it would put the wrong clip in it. And the thing is, these clips will move when you do this, so do make sure you've got the right one selected. And with it selected, new video group from clips. And it has bounced it up to its own layer, its own video group, which means that I can then position it over the top of everything else. So now what I'm starting to do is leverage Photoshop layers by building up from the background, through the logo, right through to the text. And they are one on top of the other. So I am going to be very diligent here and label these things. So that's the tagline. And it's got my text in it. Now, at this point, I need to put that transition in. I need to make sure that it transitions nicely between the two. So what I need to do is, I want to put a crossfade on the bottom one. So back up over here and crossfade, drag and drop it between the two elements, and that will add that crossfade to it. But these two elements, I haven't got anything for them to crossfade from. So they would just need a fade. And if I put the fade on the left-hand side, it will act as a fade in. So going back to my transitions and choosing fade and drag that down to the logo and repeat the process for the text. And then I can position that if I like. So let's see what we've got at the moment. Coming out of there, into the background, and then they fade in. That actually works quite nicely. The problem's going to be at the end. Now the bottom layer isn't long enough. It stops, but the remaining layers carry on. So I need this bottom layer, and I need to take that out a bit. And at the end, rather than it stop there, I could either, I've got a lot of options at this point, I could have it fade to black and have every element there fade to black. That would work. I could leave it like that because I'd probably put, if it was a real video, the URL up there and leave it set on that as the final frame. So you've got lots of options, up to you, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So I think that works, but if you did want those to fade in at the same point that the background did, then all you need to do is to grab it and move it up there, and then you would need to extend that. So let's have a look at that. So just playing it through at the end there, and this time they all fade in together. So really is personal preference, whatever you think looks best. I'll leave it set like that, and I'll extend those to the end of the clip. Right, so at that stage, we've learnt quite a lot. We know what file formats are supported, and we've got the timeline going. We've created some video groups. We've done some trimming. We've done some splitting. We've reordered the clips as well, and we've put transitions between them. So let's have a look why, in particular, we'd be using Photoshop when it comes to editing video. And I'm going to concentrate on, let's have a look at that clip there, that one with the coffee. Now, at the moment, it's exactly as the camera shot it. And one of the things that Photoshop is very good at is adjusting it. So making adjustments just as you would to a single frame, but this time applying it to an entire section of a video. So what I'm going to do there, first thing to do if you want to do that, is to convert the element in the layers palette. So up to filter and convert it for smart filters. And it gives me the usual warning, and I'm just going to say OK to that. And that changes it on the timeline. It's changed it to a purple rather than a blue. So now I know that it's a smart object. And over here, it's changed that tiny little icon. Whereas it used to be a film, it's now got the smart object icon representing it. So I've made that change to it. And that will allow me now to apply some filters to it and do things like that. So let's apply first of all to show you that you can in there apply an adjustment. So I'm going to change the hue and saturation. And it has clipped that to it. So it's got the adjustment here, and it has clipped that to the layer. And within here you can choose some presets. Some of them don't change it too much. That made it a little bit lighter. And there was one that made it much darker. There's a sepia effect applying to it. And that's happening, so just to take this across, that is happening to the entire clip, not just one frame of it. Usually when you apply adjustments, it's applying to a single frame of a still image. But everything that you know about Photoshop, you can now apply to video by converting it to a smart object and then making the change to it, and it applies to the entire clip. Now that's why it's very intensive on the machine, because as it's doing this, it's doing it to multiple frames. So whereas sometimes Photoshop can be quite slow, just applying an effect to one frame, this time it's applying it to 23.976 frames every second. So it's doing a lot of work here. So there's a sepia one. Now I actually didn't want that kind of look. I wanted to make it darker. So just darker. So not increase it. I wanted to reduce it. I wanted to make it dark around the edges, but not in that way. So let me change the hue slightly. Oh, and I don't want it to look like blood either. Oh, good grief. Oh, I could do all sorts of strange things there. How about some alien drink? That works nicely. And you can change the saturation, etc. with that too. So I'm just going to desaturate that a little bit. And let's see if I can hold on to that if I then take it out. So back to the old style. Oh, it's changed it. I tell you what, I'm going to make that green because I like that being green so much. There we go. So I've changed the colour completely there. I hope nobody's eating, it'll put you right off. And as I say, it's done it to the whole clip. So that's an adjustment. But you're not just limited to adjustments. So I'm going to go and find another clip. Let's have a look at this longer clip here. So first of all, let's have a look what we've got. It's the milk being poured into a glass there. Now, the example I gave you at the very beginning when I was talking about the slides, and I was saying about what you could do, so let's stop that there, we don't see the end. What you could do on your desktop that used to take a room full of machines was that kind of sketchbook look, and there is a way to do that. So making sure I've got the right clip selected. And if I go up to filter, I'm going to convert for smart filters. And I get the warning again. And this time going back to the filters and going to the filter gallery. And in here, this is the standard Photoshop pixel gallery. Filter gallery, sorry. And within there, I've got all of the usual brushes, so I could make that coloured if I want, or I could have it cut out. So these are probably effects you've actually seen on the TV. So I'll just show you a few of those, and you see how quickly they're applying. Now, the one I was looking for was in the sketch group. So if I go back to the sketch group, I think I went for the graphic pen, which is that one, which was the nearest I could find to that aha video look. But there are others that you could use. So you could use any of these. In fact, you could mix and match them if you wanted to. So I'm going to go for the graphic pen. It does make a big change there. And you can finesse that over on this side. So if I want to bring in more detail, make it darker, I can do that. I can make it much darker here or make it lighter. So fiddle around with these, getting just the look you want. Now the default I thought was too white. I was losing far too much detail. And the last thing you can do is change this. So you can change it from diagonal to horizontal, going left or right, or you can make it vertical. So whatever effect you're looking for. The pencil look I'm looking for meant I think right or left diagonal worked better because it was just like, it looked more hand-drawn than it does if you do it straight. And then that's it. That's all you need to do. So just OK that, and instantly it's applied. Now at this stage, it has instantly applied it, but once I start playing it, it needs to render it. So it does play, but it plays very slowly. You look at how fast that is now moving. It's much, much slower. But that's because it is doing so much. And once it's played it through once, the second time you play it through will be much quicker. So just get used to the fact as you start doing this, it will play very slowly as you do it. I actually think that's a benefit because I can see it rather than it whizzing past in a couple of seconds. I can really see whether that's working for me or not. And you can see it has also changed the length of this, so I've got stuff flying in now that I don't particularly want. So I'd be looking to take this back and take that back. So when this fades from that into the end, so my credits at the end, it fades in nicely. So there we go. So that is probably the most advanced thing that I think you could do with Photoshop and video, because that would be very difficult in most other applications. You could maybe get plugins and get special effects, but Photoshop can do that out of the box. That's the benefit of editing the video in Photoshop. Now, a couple of other elements to get in there. You've seen I've put in the logo. You've seen me put in the text elements. They can go anywhere. So, for instance, I've got this logo here. If I wanted that logo at the beginning as well, then instead of fiddling around on the timeline and trying to move it and copy it, what you can do is leverage what you know about the layers palette. So I'm going to fold this up. It's starting to get complicated, but I'm not interested in the base layer particularly. What I want to do is to take this logo and place it somewhere else. So I want it where it is, but I also want it somewhere else. So if I put that in the tagline there, you can see that duplicates it, but it puts it next to it here. So I've now got two copies of that, one on top of the other. It has put it in the different layers, but it's put it one on top of the other. So if I drag that one back out of the way, I can put my text back where it needs to be. But that gives me a coffee cup flying around. So what I'm going to do with that is take it back over towards the beginning. And I want that appearing at the beginning. And in this case, I would probably move that down so it's not on the wing of the aircraft. And once I've done that and it's in its own space on the tagline layer, nothing to stop me pulling that down and putting it on the logo layer somewhere else. And notice what that did. If I just undo that, it also took it from the tagline. So as I'm doing that again, it takes it from the tagline down into the logo. So what you do on the timeline here with your sequences is replicate it over on the right hand side with the layers. So I've got that in there as well. So you can do that with as many elements as you like. So I'm going to put one more element on here and then we're ready to export it. And what I'm going to do with that is I am going to create here, let me do another blank one. So a new video group. So there's a blank video group. And this time I want this to be like a lower third really. So I will put a lower third there. And I need some elements to be my lower third. And I'm going to repurpose one of the images. And the image that I'm going to repurpose is in the base video, and it's this brown coffee pattern. And how I'm going to do that is get that, and I'm holding down the Option key on a PC, on a Mac, and dragging that up to the top. It's the Alt key on a PC. And I've now got a copy of it. It has put it in its own, well, it's put it in the correct video group, which is lower third, and it's put it in the same position as the first one, and that I don't want. I want it taking back over here, and I'm just going to fade it in at some point over here. Probably when that comes in. So let me get my playhead in the right place, which is there-ish, and just drag that back over there. But it's a lower third, so I don't want all of it. And it's really simple to create a customized lower third with a nice background like that by just dragging that and moving it down. So I'm just moving it down so it covers the bottom element there that I'm looking for. And then put it in the right place. So at the moment, obviously, I've got the coffee cup and all sorts going on here. And I probably wouldn't cover the hand up, but for demonstration purposes, I'm going to. Let's put it there. And I now need one more element, which is I need some text on there. So T key to get the text, making sure I'm in the lower third video group, and then click to add some text. And that has put the text over here. Now, is that right or not? Do I need that text in the lower third group or not? And if you think about it, you're going to have to affect the stacking order here. The stacking order is what's going to give you the right look. So having a group for the lower third, not bad, but you really need two because you need to put the text above it. Now, all I'm going to do for speed is move the background down to the layer below, and that pushes my text back. And when I hover over here, I should be able to see the text if I've got any text at all. And I didn't bother typing anything, did I? Oh, that's clever. Right, I will just put here coffee beans. And then I will fix the mess that I have made for myself. So this is the text I now don't need. This is the text I do, and I'm going to put it in the right place. So move it here and make it smaller. So get into there and edit that and make it smaller. And I don't know how big that would need to be. That will probably work nicely. So dragging that up there. Now you must have seen this technique before. It's the kind of thing you see a lot on interviews. So you usually have somebody talking and up comes who they are and where they're from. So it's that kind of effect. But because you're doing it in Photoshop, you can be as adventurous as you like with the effect. So what I'm going to do with this is just have the two things fade in, and I'll have them the same length as well. Initially, I'll have them the same length. So I'm going up to my transitions and I'm going to get a fade and apply it to the bottom layer first at the beginning and at the end. So there's a fade in and a fade out, and the same with the text, a fade in and a fade out. And let's have a look how that's looking. So that appears and disappears in my coffee cup, and there my lower third comes in and then it fades out nicely. And it's completely editable. So if I would like to take that back and have that fade in after the lower third has faded in, so let's have a look at that. So the brown part will come in first, and then the text will appear, and then the text will fade out, and almost at the same time the background will fade out too. So there is putting in other elements, so text elements, pixel-based elements, whatever you need. Now, while it's thinking about it, one more thing I need to do before I export this file. I promised we'd put some audio in. Now, you're not going to hear this audio, but I will put this video up afterwards and I'll send you a link to it so you can see it. You might hear it if I take my headphones off, but first of all I'm going to need to get that audio in there. And how I'm going to do that is to use this audio track at the bottom here. And as I click on that, you can add audio and you can add a new audio track. So if what I was attempting to do was put music behind a spoken track, because these clips already had audio, I could do that. You're not limited to one audio track. So add audio, and it now needs to go and find the audio. And the audio is in a folder called audio. and just open that and it will load it in. Now this is when it really will start to slow down. So what I need to do, the clip is far too long. To show you how long, I'm going to zoom out and you can see it is over 3 minutes and my clip is less than 40 seconds. So all I need to do is grab the end and drag that back in. Now the only problem with doing that, it fixes the problem, it's now the right length, but it stops very abruptly. So I'm going to go right down towards the end and I'm going to play that. Yes, and I deafen myself. Just so you know there really is audio there, I'm going to play it for you. Right, so there really is audio and I really am deafening myself. Okay, but the trouble is when it gets to the end, it just totally stops. So what I'm going to do in there is click on that same little triangle and now I get audio options. And my audio options in here are I can adjust the volume. Well, that would be handy because it's very loud. So I'm going to take that down in there. And I can elect to fade in at the beginning. Well, this song actually starts at the beginning and it fades in itself, so I don't need that. But because I've truncated the length of it, I do need a fade out at the end. So I'm going to fade out at the end there. I could do with seeing how far that is. So I'm going to lose my zoom tool. I actually just want that to be 1 second. And there we go. Now, once I've got the audio in there, this is a very important option, which is mute audio, and that will speed up Photoshop's processing if I choose to mute that clip while I work. I'll also probably choose to do that because if I repeatedly hear the same music or the same dialogue, I'll drive myself mad. But at the moment, that's it. I've finished this, so I'm not going to mute it. And if I just play that to myself, make sure it's okay. So just finishing that, it fades nicely over 1 second. It also goes out to black as well, to white, doesn't it? So let's extend that a smidgen. That's a bit better. Right, so I've got my finished product. What's the one thing left that I need to do? Anybody want to hazard a guess what that is? Because at the moment, all my hard work is in here. I'm happy with it. It's got my Photoshop filter effects on it, but I can't share it with you unless I export it to the big wide world. And that's what I need to do. Now, at this stage, I haven't even saved that. Naughty me. So I'm going to save it and I'm going to put it in my data folder, root of my data folder, and I'll call this Coffee Clips. Now, what is it saving at that point? Well, it's saving the Photoshop file, but that Photoshop file now has in it all my video clips, all my still clips, my text elements, and my audio. Or does it? No, it doesn't. It links to those elements. So the Photoshop file is actually quite small, which is good, because if you've used the clips and somebody else has the same clips elsewhere, you can swap the Photoshop file, and as long as they are relatively in the same place, then they can use their own version of the clips and you don't have to transfer a massive file. So that's something to think about, and that file is 31.9 meg. So there it is, 31.9 meg. But just to show you, the audio clip was 9 meg on its own. And I had the video files, which were these two, and together they are over 200. So it is definitely linking to those and not embedding them. And at that stage, now I've saved it, it is time to export it. So back into Photoshop, and the option is available from the File menu, down to Export, and you have a dedicated option in there to render video. So electing to render the video gives you this dialog box. This is very, very similar to the dialog that you will see when you come to process images, but this time it's talking about video. So first thing, it needs a name, and it's taken the name from the Photoshop file name, so that's fine, and it's going to put it on my desktop. But I could choose to create a subfolder from in here, and then I have the most important element, which is this section here, which is the Media Encoder and how it works. So the first thing is, do you want it as a media encoded file, or do you want an image sequence? Now, which ones you want would depend on what you're trying to do with the output. So most of the time I'm going to want a video, so I'm going to go for the Media Encoder options, and then I need to select these settings in here. So from the top, there's the format that's needed. So there's DPX, H.264 or QuickTime. If you are in any doubt, then go for H.264 because that will work virtually anywhere. If you want high quality, you probably go for QuickTime though. So if what I wanted to do with this was maybe create an ident, and I wanted to take that ident and take it into other projects, maybe even in Final Cut Pro, then I don't want a compressed H.264 version. I want a full quality one, and for that I would choose QuickTime. But for our purposes, H.264 is fine. And then within the format, you have presets, and there are a lot of presets in there. I think you're fairly safe going for a YouTube one. I have uploaded videos to YouTube, and most of the time they work fine. But if there is a problem with it, YouTube will let me know. So I know that if it is in a format that YouTube will play, then I can almost guarantee it will play anywhere else. But you do have all of those options. Now, what I'm going to do is just go for high quality at the top, so it's a decent quality. I'm going to leave the size set to document size. Now, what size is referring to is the actual pixel-based size, and it is 1280 by 720. So those clips that I had were HD. They were 720 HD. Then I've got a frame rate. So you have options in there for your frame rate. I'm going to leave that set as it is. And then you've got more advanced options. So your field order, do you want it progressive or the upper field first, the lower field first? Most of the time, if you're just doing video in here, you can just leave those set alone. If you do have any specific instructions from a client or whoever you're sending it to, then you can change those in there. So you have those options available. Then you specify which part of the video you want to export. Well, I want to take all of it. So I'm going for all frames, but you could choose by frame. So you could say come in at frame 10 and come out at frame 800 if you wanted to, which is like an IO export, an in-out export. You mark the frame in, you mark the frame out, and that's just the area you're going to take. And then it's time to render it. So I'm going to hit render on that, and I'm going to carry on talking while it thinks about it. It doesn't usually take too long. As you can see, this is about, I think we said 40 seconds, didn't we? About 38, 40 seconds. Now, it would probably be faster if I was doing it to full quality. A video export takes longer the more that you're trying to compress it. So I work with a lot of video in a week, and it's not unusual that I've got a machine compressing away for about 6 hours on stuff. But what I do is export everything at full quality and then set a batch process going to really crunch it down to really tiny. So some days I have a 60 gig file, and when I finish compressing it, it's about 200 meg. And obviously to do that, it takes some time, so I leave the machine doing it on its own in a batch process. So I reckon this is actually going to take longer to export the video than the video is long. But it will get there. I know it will because it's already done it. Right, okay, let's have a look. Let's have a look at some questions while we're doing that. And I have a question here. Meant to say, what if you do not have Bridge? You can just import them. So you can just elect a file open and import a video, and it will stick it exactly as it did from Bridge. But if you have Photoshop, you probably have Bridge because it ships with it. It shipped with it for many years. And Bridge is really useful because Bridge is what's going to indicate instantly to you whether that file, whether that clip format will work or not. So do have a look and see if you've got Bridge installed. My guess is, Kathleen, you probably would have. And we've got something special for Bridge coming up shortly, so hang around to the end, and you might like Bridge even more at the end. Right, next one. Where were the clips from? The clips came from iStock Video, and they were just a couple that were available in the last few weeks, so I just used those. Is there a single audio track or a multiple one? There are multiple ones. You can have as many as you like, within reason, and bear in mind, audio really slows the machine down. Can it all be done in Windows as well as the Mac version? Yes, it can. And can other video apps do those filters? Other video apps can only do the filters that they have built in or ones that you can buy as extensions. So if there are any extensions available, then yes, you will be able to do similar things. But in here with the Photoshop filters, they only work in Photoshop. And Bruce was wondering if I use Photoshop for most of my video production. I can honestly say, Bruce, no, I don't. I have a whole other thing going on with most of my video. The main reason that I don't use Photoshop for the majority of my work is that it's just too long. For instance, I'll have a video from this session and it will be around 1 hour and 5, 1 hour and 10. And that isn't something that I want to be processing in Photoshop. But if I want a special effect on something like that filter effect, or I want to add some kind of blur to it, then absolutely I will create the element in Photoshop. And when I come to do the export in the way you've just seen me do it, I would export it at full quality. And then I would take it into either Final Cut or ScreenFlow if it's a screencast, or Camtasia or some other finishing product. But I don't even use those to export it. I then use something else for all the batch processing. So I do work in Photoshop, but not with the majority of my work. It's just too long for Photoshop. Okay, so it's exported. It should be on my desktop somewhere. So I'm going to go and get it and let's have a look at it. And it is on my desktop. It is 48 meg and it's not the best video we've ever seen. But I'm just turning that off before I deafen myself. It is the finished product, and you will see every element that you saw me create there. This is the finished product. So not sure. Oh, and there's my lovely green tea. Brings new meaning to green tea, doesn't it? Even though it's coffee. So there's my filter effect, liking my filter effect. And of course, I wouldn't just really slap that filter on in that way. I'd have it merging in and out nicely. I could even put another element on the top of it and do all sorts of masking and things with it. But that is my finished product. So I'll put a link up to that later. That is my finished product for that one. There is one other thing to show you, which is a different kind of video. So I'm going to go back to my data and I'm actually going to open up a new file. And this file is called Slideshow, and this is a slightly different type of video, although the principles are identical. Right, what I have here, 5 JPEGs, just 5 JPEGs lined up in their own sequence called Video Group 1. So I added them into Photoshop from Bridge, but I could just have imported them in here. And then I've added them to a video group. And let's have a look what we've got. We have just still images. There's no movement at all. When I get to the end of it and I press play, it just cuts straight from one video, from one image to the next image. No movement at all going on there. Just cuts from image to image to image. So let's have a look at those. And the last one is just another cup. So just some coffee related images. Right, so that's what I've got. They are not a video. So what I'm thinking is, I'd like to be able to take still images that I might have been working from in Photoshop and create a video from nothing. So if you don't have any video footage, you don't have any stock image that you could use, or you don't have any image that you've actually recorded, any video you've recorded, then you could use standard still images. But how do we make them move? Well, in here, we have here this icon. Now straight away you can see you should see there I got a tiny little I'm thinking about it spinning wheel, and this is the motion dialog, and within here at the moment there's no motion on it, but I can put motion on it. So if I put there zoom, I can choose where to zoom from. So let's have a look in there. I can choose the pinpoint and change it to a corner. The active pin is the white one. And I can choose then to zoom in or zoom out. Well, I'm going to zoom in on that one. And I've added some motion effect to that one. I'm now going to move on to this one. And I'm going to do the same again, but this time I'm going to move out instead of in. So zoom and zoom. Was it zoom out or zoom in? I've forgotten. My mind's going, you know. Right, zoom in and zoom out, that's right. And on the third one, going into the third one with a different option. And this time I'm going to pan and zoom. And if I pan and zoom, I can choose whether I zoom in or zoom out and the angle of that. So I'll take that up to like 20 degrees. And I'm just going to go through and do that with the other 2 remaining images. So in this one, instead of pan and zoom, I'll just pan it and change that direction to 45 degrees and do it the same thing on the last one there. And what should we go for? Let's go for another zoom and let's go for a zoom in. Right, so all of those have now got some kind of motion happening on them. And of course, I would not want it to cut straight from one image to the next image. For that, I'd want to put a transition on it. So let's have a crossfade in there as well and just crossfade all of those images into each other. So bringing that onto there. At the beginning, I would like to fade from black. So fade from black and fade to black at the end. And I'm done. I've got a sequence. I now have motion. Now, what it needs to do is render this frame by frame. So this might be very slow, but let's press play. and it starts to play. It is very slow and it's quite jerky, but you can see it's rendering as it goes and it is moving. So if you are familiar with the Ken Burns effect, if that's something you've ever heard of, this is very similar, only you have the control over it. You can pan, you can zoom and pan, and you can put all your transitions on it. And of course you can do all of the other things that we looked at with the first demonstration. So if you wanted this to have as a filtered effect on it, you wanted to change the zoom, then you could do. So you can do all of the things, even though this isn't actually video at this point. But of course it would be video if I exported it, and I can export that in exactly the same way, going up to export, down to render video. I'm leaving all of that set the same and then just render it out. Now that's saying it's too large. Oh dear, I've got this custom size here, so I need to change that to 1280 by 720, get it down to a video size. I used full images there with that. So that will go away and think about it for a while and then render that video out. And when it does, I will put it somewhere and put a link in. If you're on YouTube, I will put a link underneath the video and you can go and see the finished product. But that's it for the demonstration. So let's go back in. And I hope that that has at least whetted your appetite for exploring video in Photoshop and seeing what effects you can create with it. But then, of course, there's the demands, isn't there? What do you need in the way of hardware and software? Well, Photoshop CC is best, but if you have Photoshop CS6, that supports video too. You will need a 64-bit operating system, and that's really to do with accessing the RAM. You need a lot of RAM for this. If you have a multi-core machine, I would say 2 to 3 gig per core, with a minimum of 8 gig. This machine you saw tonight has 32 gig of RAM, and apart from a little bit when it was rendering, it actually coped very well. My concern when I thought about you doing video in Photoshop was the fact that the hardware just couldn't keep up with it, but it doesn't do at all bad. And storage, well, you'll need hard drives, you'll need plenty of space. As I say, not for the Photoshop files, but for the source video. They are linked to from the Photoshop files. But the reason that you'll need multiple hard drives is that more is better. At least 2, because you don't want to be having the render drive and your scratch drive set to be your main hard drive. Everything will move much faster if you have all of that going on a secondary drive. So storage, very important. So we covered supported file formats, importing video into Photoshop. We had basic edits, filters, we added text, we added audio, and we exported. So now it's over to you. And I'd say just go and have some fun with it. And talking of having fun, if you're a Mac user, you won't want to miss the Mac Bytes Live on the 2nd of June. Apple are having an event, the keynote speech at WWDC, and in true Mac Bytes style, we will be covering it live. So if you go to macbytes.co.uk, you will get all the details of that. It is at the top of the homepage, and doors open at 5:30 UK time, which is 9:30 AM Pacific time, and hopefully you'll be able to join us. But if you're not into Macs, you're into Photoshop. Join us next time when we're looking at Photoshop brushes. Now I must point out, this is a new date. If you have already booked for this, don't worry, you don't have to rebook. You will be getting an email advising you that we have bumped it forward a week. So we're actually back a week. It's a week later than it was. And the reason is I've been inundated. People want to come, but England are playing in the World Cup that night. So I've moved it. It's a week later. So enjoy the game. And then the following week, we can all console each other that we'll have got a good stuffing. And we'll have a look at Photoshop brushes. And we'll be looking at creating them, importing them, exporting, sharing, and much, much more. And as I talked about Adobe Bridge tonight, we also have our next event, another new one, which is 17th of July. And we're looking at Adobe Bridge and all that you can do with Adobe Bridge. Now, don't miss that one. It's the forerunner to a summer full of photography events covering Lightroom and Photoshop. So go book. And just to remind you, I've been Elaine Giles. You can find me all over the internet as Elaine Giles, specifically my blog, which is elainegiles.co.uk. But I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, YouTube as the Elaine Giles, and everywhere else. So I'd love to hear from you and see what you're doing with Photoshop and everything else that you're working with. So thanks for attending. We're now going to head off into Q&A. And thank you for everybody who has watched on YouTube. And I will see you next time.